crossing the desert to the great city. Thus saith the Lord. Two travelers walked slowing along an extensive desert. Their feet were painful from the burning sands. They were headed toward a distant city. Only the hope of reaching their destination encouraged them in their arduous journey. Their bread and water were nearly exhausted. The younger of the two began to weaken, and he begged his companion to continue the journey alone, because his strength was failing him. The older traveler tried to encourage the young man, telling him that perhaps they would find an oasis soon where they would regain their lost strength, but the latter did not take heart. He thought of leaving him in that lonely place, but in spite of being also weary, he placed his dejected companion upon his shoulders and continued the journey laboriously. When the young man was rested, thinking of the weariness he was causing the one who was carrying him upon his shoulders, he let go his neck, took him by the hand, and thus they continued the journey. A great faith encouraged the old one's heart, which gave him strength to overcome his weariness. As he had foreseen, there appeared on the horizon an oasis, under whose shade the coolness of a spring awaited them. Finally they reached it, and they drank from that strengthening water until they were satisfied. They slept a refreshing sleep, and on awakening they felt that their weariness had disappeared. Neither did they experience hunger nor thirst. They felt peace in their heart and strength to reach the city they were seeking. They would not have wanted to leave that place, but it was necessary to continue the journey. They filled their flasks with that pure, clear water and continued their journey. The older traveler, who had been the young man's support, said, "Let us use the water we are carrying sparingly. It is possible that we may meet along the path some pilgrims, overcome by fatigue, dying of thirst, or sick, and it will be necessary to offer them what we are carrying." The young man protested, saying that it would not be sensible to share that which might not even be enough for them. That in such a case, since they had gone through so much effort to obtain that precious element, they could sell it at the price they desired. Not satisfied with this answer, the old one replied that if they expected to have peace in their spirit, they should share the water with those in need. Annoyed, the young man said that he preferred to consume the water in his flask by himself before sharing it with anyone whom he should encounter along the way. Again, the presentiment of the old one was fulfilled, for they beheld before them a caravan composed of men, women, and children, who were lost in the desert and were on the verge of perishing. The kind old man promptly approached those people, to whom he gave water to drink. The travelers felt strengthened at once. The sick opened their eyes to thank the old traveler, and the children ceased weeping for thirst. The caravan arose and continued its journey. There was peace in the heart of the generous traveler, while the other one, seeing his flask empty, with alarm said to his companion that they should return in search of the spring to replenish the water which they had consumed. "We should not turn back," the good traveler said, "for if we have faith, we will find a new oasis further on." But the young man doubted. He was afraid, and he preferred to say goodbye to his companion right there to go back in search of the spring. Those who had been brothers in a common cause were separated. While one continued forward in the pathway, filled with faith in his destiny, the other, thinking that he might die in the desert, ran toward the spring, obsessed with the fear of death in his heart. At last he arrived, panting and fatigued, and with satisfaction he drank until he quenched his thirst, forgetting his companion, whom he allowed to go on alone, as well as the city which he had renounced, deciding to remain and live in the desert. It was not long after that a caravan, composed of exhausted men and women, passed nearby. They anxiously approached to drink from the waters of the spring. But suddenly a man appeared who would not allow them drink and rest unless they paid him for those benefits. It was the young traveler who had taken possession of the oasis, making himself the lord of the desert. Those men listened to him with sadness, for they were poor and they could not buy that precious treasure which would satisfy their thirst. Finally, depriving themselves of what little they carried, they bought a little water to quench their desperate thirst and continued their journey. Soon, that man converted himself from a lord to a king, for those who passed that way were not always poor. There were also powerful ones who could give a fortune for a glass of water. This man gave no further thought to the city that was beyond the desert, and much less to his fraternal companion who had carried him upon his shoulders, saving him from perishing in that wilderness. One day he saw a caravan approaching that surely was headed toward the great city. But to his surprise, he observed that those men, women, and children were walking filled with strength and joy, singing a hymn. This man could not understand what he beheld, and his surprise was even greater when he saw the one who had been his traveling companion marching at the head of the caravan. The caravan stopped in front of the oasis, while the two men looked at each other, greatly surprised. Finally, he who dwelt in the oasis asked his former companion, "Tell me, how is it possible that there are people who pass through this desert without being thirsty or experiencing weariness?" The reason was that inwardly he wondered what would become of him the day when no one approached to ask for water or lodging. The good traveler said to his companion, "I reached the great city, but along the way not only did I encounter the sick, but also the thirsty, the lost, the weary, and I revived everyone with the faith which has revived me." And thus, from oasis to oasis, one day we reached the gates of the great city. There I was summoned by the lord of that kingdom, who, seeing that I was familiar with the desert, and that I showed pity for all travelers, gave me the mission to return and be a guide and advisor along the difficult crossing of the travelers. Here I am, once again guiding another of the caravans I must take to the great city. "And you? What brings you here?" he asked the one who had remained at the oasis. Ashamed, the latter was silent. Then the good traveler said to him, "I am aware that you have made this oasis yours, that you sell its waters, and that you charge for shelter. These benefits are not yours. They were placed in the desert by a divine power, to be used by anyone who needed them. Do you see these multitudes? They do not have need of the oasis, because they do not feel thirsty, nor are they fatigued. It is enough that I transmit to them the message that the Father of the great city conveys through me for them to arise, finding strength at every step with a goal that they have to reach that kingdom. Leave the spring to those who thirst, so that those who suffer the rigors of the desert may find rest and quench their thirst in it. Your pride and selfishness have blinded you, but what good has it been to be the lord of this small oasis when you live in this lonely place and have deprived yourself of knowing the great city that both of us were seeking? Have you already forgotten that goal which was for both of us? That man, listening in silence to the one who had been his faithful and unselfish companion, burst into tears, for he felt repentant because of his faults, and tearing off his false finery, he went in search of the starting point, which was where the desert began, in order to follow the path which would take him to the great city. But now he walked along the pathway illuminated by a new light, which was of faith and love toward his fellow men. End of parable. I am the Lord of the great city, and Elijah is the old one of my parable. He is the voice of one crying in the wilderness. It is he who again manifests himself among you, in fulfillment of the revelation that I gave you in the transfiguration on Mount Tabor. Follow Elijah, O my beloved people, and everything will change in your life. All will be transformed in your worship and ideals. Did you believe that your imperfect worship would be eternal? No, disciples. Tomorrow, when your spirit beholds the great city on the horizon, he will say, like his master, "My kingdom is not of this world." Teaching 28, 18-40.